This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Andrey Morozov of FinHub Global Ventures. Andrey, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Hall. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Can you tell us how you got into early stage investing?
Well, I'm not going to lie. It's a traditional, classic, old school way of entering into venture investing. I just did my first startup, sold it, did my second startup, sold it, and then basically, like everyone else, I want to change the world. So I just got into teaching other people how to do stuff. That's it.
That sounds great. Sounds like a good experience and a great path to get there. So what does FinHub Global Ventures focus on? How do you guys work?
So telling from the name, we are focusing on FinTech. And my startups, they were about FinTech. They were about payments. And it's really, I can tell you, it's really, really hard to build and run and sell, especially FinTech startup. And the reasons are plenty, and we can talk about it later. But what I found is that there are a lot of people who want to build stuff in FinTech, who know market, who know a lot of things. But just to get started, it takes a lot of bravery for them because they know how things work in the inside. So what I wanted to do is to help those people and to get them started, to help them grow and to help them sell and exit at the end. So that's the whole idea of the FinHub.
So FinTech's a pretty broad space. There's a lot going on. There's payments and many other sectors. Which of the sectors do you normally focus on inside the FinTech realm?
So for FinHub, the primarily spaces is payments and money remittance, and also industries which are closely related, like risk management, mobile wallets, and loyalty programs and things like that. And obviously, you need to focus on something because FinTech is a really broad space, and you need to know regulations and infrastructure, all those things. So yeah, payments are primary industry, but as we go, we probably will be growing sideways too.
And so why are FinTech startups harder to launch than other startups? What makes that challenging?
There are several reasons, and obviously everyone talks about regulations and licenses. And one of the reasons London is considered FinTech capital in the world because they made regulation a bit friendlier than other countries. But generally, it's still a huge problem. Other issue is accessing infrastructure, because you can't just pick up the phone and call to next door bank and say, hey, I want to plug into your whatever software, right? They're not going to let you. And also there is money laundering. And also, I don't know, it just takes huge amount of time, money, and effort to build all things together. Compliance, regulations, infrastructure, all this need together and working properly. It's a huge nightmare. So if you can build, I don't know, the next Instagram you can build in a few months, and in a year you can sell it. For FinTech, I don't know, it takes 5 years, it takes sometimes 10 years. So what I'm trying to do here is to help to speed up this cycle.
So what are some of the techniques you use to overcome these regulatory, infrastructure, and other challenges?
So our philosophy in FinHub is shared resources, basically. So when we have a founder coming up with an idea of a startup, we can give him access to payment networks. We can give him access to licenses in different countries. And we can give him like IT capacity to integrate everything. And basically what's left for him is to develop the market proposition, develop the product, and then launch it and see what happens. So instead of spending, 1-2 years on doing it, we can do it in a month or two as well.
I've heard some FinTech groups, instead of trying to replace incumbents, the big banks and the other groups. They try to partner with them. And that's one way to get past the regulatory and the infrastructure challenges, is to work alongside some would consider competitor. What's your take on partnering with the big banks versus trying to displace them in some of these sectors?
Right. Just the other day, I was writing a blog post, and my spell checker sent me a message. Hey, I think it's a strange word combination, bank and modern. Can you believe it? So it's basically a computer made a joke. but this joke is surprisingly real. I mean, there's all this talk of banks trying to catch up with innovation and building insider innovation teams, blah, blah, blah. It's still super hard to work with those institutions because they're so afraid. You're probably reading the news all the time, like one bank was fined for $1 billion and another one for $2 billion. And so basically the vertical of management in those organizations, they try to do everything they can to be risk averse. Okay. And yes, they under the pressure of shareholders and customers to be innovative, but it's not overcoming that instinct. Okay. So to come to the big bank as a founder and try to build something on their platform, I mean, it's like a fairy tale, to be honest. I mean, I never saw anything good coming of it. So that's, and then banks, they don't have a monopoly on infrastructure, things like that. A lot of ways of coming around those issues, but you still need to have something. I mean, so like us, right? We have this infrastructure issue solved. Okay, so we don't need to solve it every time. And we are not a big bank either, right? So we are nimble, we are small, we can innovate quickly. And at the same time, we have access to the most of the things we need and the founders need.
I've noticed even outside the fintech realm that corporations want innovation, but when startups arrive with the innovation, corporations have a hard time adopting or testing out those things because the corporation has a brand. They've got a large user base, they've got requirements, contracts in place, and the startup usually is a piece of technology that does something a little bit better, but it was always hard for the big companies to adopt those startups directly. And so you see experiments and you see pilots and you see other things that are run in very contained ways in order to try these ideas out and see how they resonate. How do you see that shaping up in the fintech space? You see pilots and things that people can try, even though they're working inside the world of the regulatory and the corporate's brand is at risk, and they're very concerned about that. And then they're wondering if the startup will be there next year to carry it through. What's your take on all that?
So, yeah, corporates, they have totally different dynamics from small businesses or startups. And the banks, they double corporates in this matter, right? Because of all regulatory stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of things that driving corporates is internal politics, corporate politics. And so it's a classic innovator's dilemma when you have existing business, when you're afraid to disrupt it and to do something else. At the same time, you have corporate politics, which means you need to protect your position or try to, as a manager, or try to get a promotion. And to do it, you need to, again, fulfill KPIs, and you don't necessarily see how this new shiny software tool can help you, like in a big picture. It can solve some part of your business, it can improve something, but like in the big scheme of things, sometimes it's not really obvious. So it puts basically additional brakes on corporate innovation, because corporation itself is bureaucratic and slow thing, but people inside, I mean, they have the agenda too. So that's my take. Unfortunately, it's not going to change, because even startup, when it grows, it tends to turn into corporate structure as well.
Right. The startup has the innovation, but the corporate has the reach and the process and the distribution. So they both have their work. And it seems that corporations want innovation and want to grow, but they want to do it at scale. And that seems like it's a challenge to do innovation at scale. but have you seen examples of great innovation coming up and achieving scale very quickly?
Right. So you mentioned a great factor here is distribution. So basically, if we're talking about corporates, for example, in FinTech, we're talking about banks. So one of the biggest resources banks had before is distribution, right? It was before online era, before mobile era. Now, with Facebook marketing, with Google, with everything, I mean, there is no distribution problem. And this is why banks are getting into hot water against startups. So we see people like Western Union or MoneyGram, they have run for their money from TransferWise or Revolut, right? And distribution problem is being solved, right? And then if it's been solved now, then the question, why do we need big banks at all? That's a question which people tend to ask more and more these days. Okay, so that changes the picture.
So where do you think banks are going to go? Right now they have a large physical presence. On every corner is a physical bank. But as everything moves online, it just seems like that's a wasted cost because more and more the transaction is online. How do you think the banks are going to shift from that physical presence to that online presence? It seems like there would be quite a cost savings that would come with that, as well as efficiency, in the products they offer as well. What's your take on that?
So we can take a look at what's going on the European market, especially in the UK, because in the UK they have much more what they call challenger banks. I don't know, they have like 20 challenger banks. They have only 4 big retail banks. So unlike the US, where we have thousands of banks, right? UK basically used to run on 4 banks, but they now have 20 challenger banks. And it's all happened at the same time, like you said, banks tend to close down branches, reduce their networks, physical footprint, and supposedly to cut cost. But as they cut cost, well, again, they losing that distribution advantage. Because if from a consumer standpoint, for example, you need to bank like day-to-day checking account, right? So if all your banking involves pulling up your iPhone and tapping a couple of taps on an app, do you really care if what runs your app is a like big bank or small bank or one-man bank? As long as it's licensed, as long as it is your assets insured according to law, right? As long as everything runs, you don't really care. So this is what happens right now, and it's an issue. So what will happen to big banks? I don't know. I think they will try to specialize more and more. We can draw an example from Facebook. As Facebook is a huge social media corporation, right? And they used to have one website and one app, Facebook.com. Now they have a lot of stuff like Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and all of those, they like separate apps, but this is the same company. So I assume what will happen that probably big banks will go the same way. They will try and build several channels, specialized channels, and try to polish their consumer experience and compete. That's what will happen, I think.
So in the many sectors of FinTech, which of the sectors you think are the furthest along? Are payments leading the way with the adoption of new technologies and providing better services? Or do you find disbursements or banking tools or back office software much further along? Which sector you think is leading the way at this point?
Right. So FinTech, like many other industries in startups, they prone to have these hype cycles, right? So today everyone doing payments, tomorrow everyone doing something else, and that's what happens. In reality, I don't know. I would say like Jeff Bezos of Amazon says, I mean, we barely scratched the surface, to be honest. I mean, the level of services we have right now in FinTech, I mean, especially in the US, it's embarrassing. I mean, so regardless of specific industry or vertical, I would say we're just getting started. And that's why I created FinHub, because there's so much opportunity.
Can you tell us more about FinHub and how you guys work and where you guys are going?
Right. So we have currently a portfolio of nine startups, and six of them already have a proposition on the market, their product on the market. And the flagship, I would say, is the flagship startup called Payment Ninja. And it's payments, it's card payments. It's not Bitcoin or anything like that. But the main thing about it, it offers payments for free or at very low cost. So basically, if you use things like PayPal or Stripe or something, you're going to pay probably 3% commission when you're selling things online, right? With Payment Ninja, you're going to pay maybe half of that or third of that. I mean, 1%. For example, in Europe, we're running 0.99% for transactions. And that's a game changer. Because if you think about it, for example, online store, it runs maybe on 10 or 20% margin. So if you save another 3% on payments, it's like, I don't know, 30% of additional margin. So it's awesome. We also do a couple of enterprise software things like Cardera, which enables pretty much every business to run their own payment gateway white label. We do. Oh yeah, one very interesting startup I can tell you. We have a mobile wallet called Mark, and Mark basically enables you to make money on social media, on your social media presence. So it basically pays you to do selfies. This is really, really interesting.
You got quite a range of opportunities there, and it sounds like you're putting together a good team for taking on the fintech space. In the last couple of minutes we have of our interview, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Right. So it's an interesting question. I would say, so I think important thing to think about for everyone interested in fintech space is a cross-border opportunity. Because, for example, in payments vertical, cross-border payments growing much faster than domestic. And at the same time, it faces a huge, complicated regulatory problem. And few of companies that solved it, like PayPal, they were solving it for 20 years and the cost of billions and billions of dollars. So I think companies or incubators like FinHub, who can provide opportunity to solve this easily, they're gonna have an advantage in the future and take lead in payments innovation, I think. So again, that's why I do it.
That's a good point. Cross-border is growing faster than domestic for sure. So how best for the audience to get back in touch with you?
So you're very welcome to visit our website at finhub.vc. And you can follow me on Twitter at Andrey Morozov handler. And what else? That's pretty much it. And obviously LinkedIn, yes. On LinkedIn, please find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Happy to help anyone building fintech startups.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes, and thank you for sharing your information, and hope to have you back in a follow-on interview to go into more of these topics. But again, thank you for taking time today.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.